Okay, Madam Mayor, we are now live and recording. You may begin the meeting when you wish.
Great, thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Welcome, everyone. This is our special council meeting for April 16th. Before we begin, just remind you that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed to the Township's YouTube channel. We do have members who are attending online. So of course, please raise your hand when you're called upon or to be acknowledged to speak. So we'll go through. We have Deputy Mayor Nelson.
Present.
Councillor Watt.
Present.
Joining us online, we have Councillor Vervoort.
Present.
There we go. Councillor Johnston.
Present.
And of course, myself, Heather Watson. On the staff side, we have our clerk and acting CAO, Martina Chapin. Good afternoon. We have our legislative assistant, Patty O'Grady. And we have our manager of public works, Chief Condon. Hello and welcome. So of course, with quorum of council in attendance, I'll call the meeting to order. The purpose of today's meeting is to hear a presentation from the County of Piro regarding the regarding garbage and organics program. And we do have those presenters on online joining us as well. But before we begin with the presentation, we'll start with the land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississauga and Shebag. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations, and may we honor those teachings. Of course, the agenda was distributed in advance. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Seeing nothing, could I get an adoption of the agenda today? Councillor Johnston, second by Deputy Mayor Nelson. All in favor? And that motion carries. Thank you very much. So on to our delegations. As noted, we have representatives from the county as well as from Dillon Consulting. We have Carrie Snoddy. Hello, welcome. And we also have Betsy Varghese from Dillon Consulting. So I will hand it over to you. I don't know which one of you want to get started, but over to you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Douro-Dummer Council. We're very appreciative of you to have us today to present these topics to you. So as introduced, I'm Carrie, the manager of waste management here at the county, and we also have Betsy Varghese from Dillon Consulting to present today. So we have two presentations for you today. The first is on our garbage upload analysis that we've been going through, and then the second is on a county organics program. So we're hoping we can do each presentation and then have time for questions and comments after each. And we'll start with the garbage upload. So this study is as a result of a couple of service level reviews that the county had undertaken, as well as we received direction from county council to move forward with this study. And so the purpose of it is just to look to see if there are possible cost savings or efficiencies from moving to the 8 separate contracts for garbage collection in the county that each township manages, to potentially move to one contract countywide and see if there are any cost savings from that. So the study's been completed by Dillon Consulting with participation and input from township staff as well as county staff. And Betsy's here to present the results. This was presented to County Council on February 21st, and they made a resolution to come out to each township to present the information and gather feedback on interest in continuing or opting out of moving forward at this time. And we'll touch on that at the end of the presentation. So I will pass it over to Betsy now to complete the presentation.
Sorry, thank you. Thanks, Carrie. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So the purpose of my presentation, as Carrie mentioned, I will be giving some background on our project and go into detail about the consolidated approach and the different aspects of that we looked at that's listed there. And then I'll pass it back off to Carrie to close off the presentation. So in terms of project background, next slide, please. We initiated the project in July of last year, And we had a series of tasks that were to be completed. The first 4 tasks are to look at getting us to here today, looking at what a consolidated approach could look like. And pending the results of the direction that we get from County Council, would we then only initiate tasks 5 and 6, where we would look at what the implementation recommendation would be and document those findings in a report. But our project looked at doing a review of the current systems in each of the 8 townships, and then discussing and having interviews with staff from representatives from each of the townships and the Waste Management Committee and county staff as well. Next slide. So in terms of how much waste we're talking about, in 2022, the county generated about 11,000 tons of garbage. This is showing the spread by township, and the darker bars indicate those that are collected, garbage that's collected curbside, versus the red, which is that's collected depot based. And so about 7,000 tons is collected from curbside, and about 3,500 is collected from depots. We then had interviews, like I mentioned last summer, with the representatives from each of the townships, and we were able to speak to each of them, and we consolidated the findings and categorized them into strengths, opportunities, or issues and challenges, and opportunities with a consolidated approach. So in terms of strengths, we did hear around from all of the townships that there was initial pushback when moving to the clear bag garbage program, but that initial pushback did result in the reduction in annual garbage sent to landfill. So although it was challenging at the start, the positive outcomes are now seen. Bag tags were a useful enforcement tool, or a tool to help as the program became mature, making that transition and reducing garbage limits as well. There was a comment that the sticker program for non-compliance works well to help educate and improve compliance. And then staff have noted that there is a good relationship with the private contractor, and that the contractor is willing to return for missed collection and will collect from transfer stations on an on-call basis. In terms of issues and challenges, some of the townships commented that when equipment does break down, it has an impact on collection. So it could result in a delay, and that even further delays if the contractor doesn't have a lot of backup equipment to help resolve those issues. Animals, there's concern about wildlife issues, and especially at transfer stations. So if garbage is left outside of the animal-proof bins, animals will, of course, get into that, and that leaves the township staff responsible for cleaning up the mess. And then customer service. This was a resounding theme throughout our project, is that customer service, of course, is of utmost importance, and that townships have commented that there in the past have been complaints regarding the county's customer service for the delivery of the recycling program, and that should there be a move to a county-led program, that there need to be strengthened communication protocols in place to help prevent complaints from going back to individual townships. In terms of opportunities, staff time, so moving with a consolidated approach, if it was moving up to the county level, then that would free up some time for staff who are now dealing with complaints and other issues related to garbage collection. Efficiencies, so again, we were meeting with staff representatives in spring, so in the really beginning stages of our project, so there was a lot of interest in what sort of efficiencies could result as a result of a harmonized program, including decreased costs or increased level of service. And lastly, on education, again, just making sure that if there were to be that roll up, that there would be clear communication on who's responsible for promotion education, and that residents had clear understanding on who to direct complaints to should there be any issues. So that just provides a bit of background. I'll move into now the work that we had done on the consolidated approach. So we had to make several of assumptions, noting that every township has slightly different garbage collection programs. Our first point was to look at as understanding what the base case scenario was. And in this case, we had two. The first base case was that all 8 municipalities opt in to a consolidated approach. And then base case 2 was 7 municipalities would opt in. So Cavan Monaghan, with their recent with their council resolution, the township did decide to opt out of consolidated approach. However, they did agree to participate in our study, so which is why they were included. So base case 2 looks at all but Cavan Monaghan. The proposed approach that we had the assumption that it would maintain, maintain the same level of service that's currently provided by the townships. And that was a direction from County Council. So some of those base assumptions were that all properties that currently receive garbage collection would continue to receive garbage collection. Their garbage would be collected weekly and clear bags would still be maintained. Townships would still be responsible for the ownership and operation of their respective transfer stations, so no changes were made to the transfer stations. And then to provide a consistent program across the county, for the purpose of our analysis, changes were made for our assumptions for bag limits and or the bag tag program. So the next slide provides a summary of the different impacts to the different different townships. Again, it was for the purpose of our analysis of coming up with a consistent program. So our consolidated approach, that's the first row there. The bag tag limit, the assumption was that it would go to a 2 bag per week limit and for residential, and then 6 bag per week for commercial. And then there would be no use of bag tags allowed or permitted with this approach. So we do note that it's in the case of Douro-Dummer as well, that bag limits have been increased for the purpose of the study. And again, this assumption was made as per County Council to maintain a consistent level of service. So we had to look at all of the programs and come up with something that was consistent for the purpose of our analysis. But this would be something that would be looked at because we have heard from other townships as well, concerns of who have moved to 1 bag limit, not wanting to introduce an increase to that bag limit because it's been working effectively. So again, another thing to note here is that a strong promotion education program would be required to communicate these changes, the why and the how, and also to communicate the changes to customer service and who to contact. Customer service inquiries for concerns at the transfer station would still be directed towards township staff because of the assumption that the ownership and operation of transfer stations would still remain with the townships. So another thing that we did was we had access and received all of the waste collection contracts to understand what the potential timing, the terms and conditions were. Also, it helped us with estimating costs, which I'll speak to in a few slides, and what a potential timeline could look like for moving towards a consolidated approach. So there was a varied nature of the contracts as shown here. So what the darker bar is the current contract term, and the hash line is where there's a potential for an extension period within the existing contract. So in the case of Douro-Dummer, what we had noted from the last time we looked at the contract, and it's likely updated, but the contract is to expire in end of June with an option to extend into next year, so 1-year extension. But where we were looking at is that at the end of this year, there would be a go, no go, or sorry, at the end of this second quarter of 2024, there'd be a decision made on which way to proceed with our assumed start date. The earliest start date for a county-led transition would be in January 1st, 2026. So some additional considerations that's noted there is that the responsibility of developing, writing, bidding, and the selection process for a county-led garbage collection contract would be led, of course, by the county. That a review of all the contract terms and conditions of the existing township contracts would require consolidation to make sure that there's enough notice so that the existing contracts are ended and terminated at the same time that the contract begins for the county-led approach, and acknowledging about Blue Box transition and how producers have assumed responsibility for Blue Box effective January 1st, 2024. So the next slides just kind of talk about some of the observations and assumptions that are made. So with respect to county staffing and transition requirements, county anticipates that the current staffing levels would be sufficient to handle the responsibilities of the garbage collection program, with the exception of a temporary increase just to handle the initial complaints or resident inquiries at the beginning stages of the transition period. We anticipate that there would be a transition team to help with representatives from the townships and the county to help oversee the transition plan and to meet the target transition date. Changes to rates and fees. So we made the assumption that the consolidated approach would be funded through taxation and that residents that receive the service would pay for the service, and that there would be changes to the bylaws at the county level to establish the jurisdictional power to provide the garbage collection services. And then the townships would also need to repeal and adopt the new revised bylaws and reference the county bylaw and the level of service that they would be providing. So some initial pros and cons associated with the consolidated approach. So in terms of the cons, there would likely be modifications to the bag limits and collection days as well. If it was going to a county-led program, there could be some initial confusion from the public around what this new program is. Potential costs. So we are providing cost estimates based on the information we had available today, but the market conditions are changing. And so there would be uncertainty until there is a tender document out on the street. And then uncertainty with regards to what efficiencies could be achieved with townships opting in and out of this consolidated approach. But in terms of the pros, there would be one single contract to negotiate and maintain. There would be consistent messaging on garbage collection across the county, which could result in simplified customer service and contract administration. There's a potential for more efficient collection routes and reduced number of vehicles traveling on county roads if the township boundaries are removed and the waste collection contractor is able to determine the most efficient routes, and potential efficiencies if there is a new diversion program introduced and it could be potentially managed under one contract. So going into some of the analysis that we did, one of the first things we did was try to estimate what the potential impact on number of collection vehicles would be. And so Dylan has access to a collection system model, which we use to support the financial analysis and to look at what those impacts on number of collection vehicles would be. So we've listed there what some of the inputs to that model are. So things like households and collection route factors, the distance between households, the tons of garbage and organics that are anticipated, and information about collection vehicles. So we undertook modeling of several different scenarios, which are outlined here. So we had 11 scenarios, but there are variations of our based on our two base cases. So like I mentioned previously, we had our base case 1, which was looking at 7 separate collection systems, one for each township, noting Trent Lakes is depot-based only. And then the second one is looking at 6 separate ones, so all minus Cavan Monaghan. Scenarios 3 and 4 look at a single county collection system for garbage for all households that fall under those the base case 1 and base case 2 respectively. Scenario 5, we wanted to get a feel for if there were a certain number of households that were not included. So we wanted to just look at what min and max could be. So for this one, we looked at a reduction of households so that there would be a total number of households between 10 and 20,000. Scenarios 6 and 7 look at a separate or county organics collection contract for all households under scenarios 1 and 2. So that's for scenarios 6 and 7. Scenarios 8 and 9 look at a co-collection contract for collecting garbage and organics. And scenarios 10 and 11 look at a co-collection contract with collecting garbage on a biweekly basis and organics collected weekly. So the next slide here, this slide shows a summary of our estimated number of vehicle reductions required to service the curbside waste collection under those different scenarios. So scenarios 3 to 5 were compared against the base case scenarios 1 and 2, and the reduction in standard vehicles ranged from 3 to 5. And we also included the provision of small vehicles, which are used to access private roadways and so on. So there would be a reduction in the number of those small vehicles from 1 to 3 based on our modeling. And the summary of the potential efficiencies with co-collection of organics and garbage at the county level is also shown. So scenarios 8 and 9 were compared against the total vehicles in what I mentioned previously of the separately collected organics and garbage. So there are 4 scenarios there. So in terms of the financial analysis then, our objective was to look at what the potential cost savings could be. So these are the inputs into our financial model. So we were looking at the contract information from the last several years and the tonnages over the last several years. We looked at the collection schedule and household data, looked at financial statements and the results from the collection modeling that I just shared. So again, some of the other assumptions, we use the same number of households, the use of small vehicles servicing private roads that was carried forward in this financial analysis. So in terms of financial impacts to townships, the combined value, if we summed up the annual value of all the garbage collection contracts is about 1.4 million or 1.1 without Cabin Monaghan. There would be cost savings, of course, only if the county's collection contract was less than the total value of those township contracts. In terms of staffing, we didn't allocate a separate amount for dedicated staffing at the township levels because that time isn't tracked or budgeted separately. We assume that the townships would still continue to handle some customer service inquiries like at the transfer station. So as a result, we didn't put forward any cost savings related to township staffing as we don't anticipate a reduction in staffing levels and that we assume that any time previously spent would be redirected on other work. This slide looks at the potential annual savings to the county under different scenarios. So along the left side, we look at going from all houses all the way down to 35 to 45% of households that are within the county. So we were trying to look at where is that tipping point before there's no cost savings that are realized. And so if you compare that on the percentage of cost savings and what dollar amount that ranges, that equates to, that's shown on the far right. So obviously, the greatest savings from our estimates would be if there were more townships that were opting in. And the potential household savings is noted there in the blue box of between $10 and $14 per household without Cabin Monaghan, which could be used to fund new programs like an organics program or reduce the individual property tax rate for waste management services. In terms of financial impacts to the county, so for the bin collection and haulage, so in the contracts with the service provider, the contract is for curbside collection and the transfer and haulage of garbage that's received at the transfer stations and hauling that to the landfill facility. So the county would also upload that cost as well to collect the transfer station garbage and haul it for disposal. So that element of the cost would not be anticipated to change. And based on the information that we had available, we made our estimate is that amounts to about $450,000 a year countywide. In terms of staffing and administrative costs, like I mentioned, so the county would be assuming that responsibility for the management and maintenance of the contract and customer service inquiries. In our modeling or in our financial model, we estimated that an additional half full-time equivalent would be required for the first 6 months of the transition period to address and handle the new inquiries and to manage the contract. But these things would be part of the planning for transition and development of a staffing plan. So that in terms of co-collection with organics, we were asked to take a look and see if we could develop a high-level estimate on what the potential savings could be if there was a co-collection contract. So we had those separate scenarios that we looked at. So the estimate would be between 650 and 850,000 for all townships, less Cavan Monaghan. And conservatively, the cost savings related to co-collection would be in the range of about 40 to 60% of the organic collection contract. So the resulting impact on a per household basis would be between $15 to $17 without Cavan Monaghan. So we went back to the township representatives that we talked to in the summer. We had interviews with them in January to present our initial findings from the consolidated approach work. And we received lots of good feedback. So highlighting some of the main ones here. So there was some comments related to the efficiencies that the approach could be bringing, like the number of vehicles, reduced number of vehicles, what those cost efficiencies could be as a result of co-collection. There was questions about asking about, will there be opportunities to provide input into the program if this does proceed? So townships wanting to have a role in that, which that would be forming part of the transition plan, having representatives from the township. Inquiries about opting in or out later at a later date. And again, the theme continued regarding customer service inquiries and making sure that who would be responsible for that. Yeah, okay, moving on to the last slide here. I'll pass it back to Carrie.
Thanks, Betsy. So when this was presented to County Council back in February, they provided us with this resolution. So we were directed to present to you and request a motion from each council be sent to County Council, indicating either A or B below. So the second one should be B. And A is that the township supports inclusion of the local municipality to the implementation costing process, noting this does not mean the local municipality is committed to or supports uploading of garbage collection services to the county at this time. So it's not committing to anything. It's just staying in the process right now to look at final costing to see which townships are interested and which aren't. And then B, the other option would be that the township does not wish to be included and that you essentially opt out at this point of the process. And either way, we will report all of the information back to County Council for a decision. So this is the 6th township that we have received, well, we will be receiving feedback from. So we've presented to 4 other townships so far. 3 townships have decided to opt out of the process at this point. So that would be Trent Lakes, North Kawartha, and Cavan Monaghan. And then 2 townships have decided to stay in just to see, again, what the final costing and everything is going forward. And that would be Otonabee, South Monaghan, and Asphodel, Norwood. And so that concludes the presentation, and we're happy to receive any questions or feedback.
Okay, well, thank you for all of that. Council, over to you for questions and feedback on this presentation.
Or through the chair.
Councillor Johnston.
Are we saying that they would be taken up bi-weekly? Is that what they're saying, instead of weekly? The garbage and the
Organics?
organic, would that be bi-weekly? Maybe you should-
Through the mayor, the collection of garbage and organics would be weekly based on the request from county council to maintain the current level of service that's currently being provided. We did look at the option of bi-weekly garbage with weekly organics in those options that were presented, but there weren't any additional cost savings shown with that option. And that's not the direction that we received from county council.
And the only other question I have is that, I see where you went with the 2 bags, and we have 1 bag now. And I understand, and I see through it, that other municipalities right now have 2 bags, it's fine. But I think with our municipality, with the 1 bag, and I haven't heard much complaint about that I think it'd be more garbage and that going into it when we provide that they have 2 bags. So I just, that kind of, I don't know, I think that's a step backward in our township. My comment.
Thank you for that. Deputy Mayor Nelson.
Thanks for the presentation, Carrie and Betsy, I believe. Betsy. Yeah. Thanks, Betsy. Anyways, I sit on the waste committee and it was our recommendation that the girls come back out and do this presentation to all the township and all the municipalities and all the councilors, so that it isn't just a county decision or a waste management decision for this, but I do believe strongly that to carry on with this, to see where the numbers lie, in order for it to do that, we have to put in an RFP. And in order for it to also do that, we need to know that what partners are involved in this. And if we look at the other townships that have opted out of this so far, they have their own reasons for doing that. In some cases, they do not collect, they don't have any garbage collection at all right now. They do not, everybody's responsible for going to the transfer stations and putting that garbage in at the transfer station. So there is some definitely differences there when the girls say that the other townships have not opted in. I definitely see one thing that is very I'm kind of adamant about is I'd like to see less vehicles on our roads, running up and down our roads. And if we go to an organics program, unless the county is kind of running that program, in order for to combine the 2 efforts, to make that happen, it almost has to be under control of one, at the county level, really. It has to be under control of somebody to be able to put that together to make garbage and organics work together, in my opinion. And each one of us going off and doing our own thing, especially when it comes to organics, is I don't think that's the best cost-wise as far as saving money. So there's a lot of unknowns, I believe, and the presentation kind of has spelled out some of that, but in order for to really know what the true costs are, I think we have to make a decision on an RFP going out and seeing what them costs are. We know that they're probably going to be a lot higher than what the last with fuel costs and everything else. We got to keep that in mind. Fuel costs and insurance costs for to operate are going to be a lot higher than what these last contracts are. But I think we need to give it that information to really make a qualified decision on it. So anyways, that's to you, Mayor. That's what
Okay. Councilor Watt.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much, ladies, for the presentation. Looking forward to the next one, obviously. Good questions in here. I have to agree with Deputy Mayor Nelson here. I mean, we're already having the pickup done right now. The organics, according to the one process here, says, you know, by 2030, they don't want any organics going to the landfills. So I think unless something out of the ordinary happens, jumping in now is going to be beneficial to us and help get all the bugs ironed out and so on and so forth. The cost is definitely it's always a bottom line thing, you know, how much it's gonna cost us, how much it's gonna cost, whether it's a lot more than what we're paying now for our local pickup or whether it's not, but when you combine the both, and that's again, as Deputy Mayor Nelson says, it's an unknown right now because the numbers that we did have in here were just kind of basics, but it said, you know, with Catamonic and without Catamonic. Now you've got two other that have opted out, so you know, is it gonna change the less in, the higher the price gonna be coming in because it's not as lucrative a contract. So I would certainly be in favor of going the next step and you know, seeing where things go. And like with option A, it doesn't mean we're committed, but I want to see where this takes us to the next step and what the actual costs are. And then we can have a look at it as a council compared to what we have now and see where we go. Thank you very much. Back to you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Johnson.
One more question I have is that the organic collection, will the county or someone be providing containers?
Well, we have a presentation on that next that we'll be talking about that presentation specifically, Councillor, if you just want to hold that question for that. Any other questions on the presentation that's been made? Before we jump into that one, if I can just pop in for a quick question. On one of the slides, you had the timeline of contracts. And I noticed that the township, our township, the contract ends about 6 months, with an extension, should we go this route, ends about 6 months before the rollout begins. I'm curious what that 6 month period conceivably could look like. Is that simply us as a municipality renegotiating the terms of our existing contract instead of extending it 1 year or extending it 18 months kind of thing? Is that what you're seeing the nods? But yes. Okay, thank you for that. And lastly, on the pros and cons slide, a couple of down, the very last point as a pro saying, talking about potential efficiencies if new waste diversion collection programs are introduced. What types of efficiencies? Are we just simply talking about leveraging economies of scale, or are we talking about other, I'm just saying with new waste diversion collection programs, what kind of programs are we talking about here?
Thank you. Yes. So I think the one obvious one would be a green bin program. If that were to be introduced and there would be an opportunity to, like when we ran that scenario of co-collection, we were looking at one truck with 2 compartments to collect both garbage and organics. So that is the main, that's the obvious one there and what we were referring to. Yeah.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you very much. And lastly, you had talked about the transfer stations being maintained by the municipalities. In that, maintained, not just operated, maintained, but taxed through the costs there as well. So if costs are being uploaded, it's purely just for the curbside pickup, not for the management of the transfer station. Am I correct in assuming that?
With the exception of the handling of the garbage from the transfer stations to this disposal facility, that would still be under that it would be under the county-led contract. But are you asking about the cost to operate and maintain the transfer station?
Yes. Yeah.
So the assumption was that it would still be in the responsibility of the townships.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's dig in on the organics presentation then. When you're ready, when you get things loaded up here.
Thanks, Betsy. Okay, I will try to do this quickly because I know you have another meeting coming up. So alongside the garbage upload, we've been looking at different options for an organics program. It just makes sense to look at the two together. So that's what I'm here to present to you today. Next slide. I want to touch first on, why we are looking at this, why it's so important to implement some sort of organics program, whether it's at the township level or county level. So on the county level, it is an initiative outlined in our Waste Management Master Plan, which is a document that outlines all the initiatives that we will put forward, and that plan ends in 2030. That plan has a diversion goal of 60% waste diversion by 2030 in the entire county. And if we do have a countywide organics program, we estimate we would divert about 4,500 tons of organics every year. So we would meet that goal if we implemented a program. It could also extend the lifespan of our current landfill by 2 to 3 years. So the landfill that all of the waste in the county goes to right now that we share with the city has about 10 years left of capacity right now. If we did divert that much organics, we could extend that by 2 to 3 years. And then whatever landfill or future waste option is in place in the future, we would continue to extend the lifespan of that new option. There is resident demand for a program. We receive questions all the time from residents who would like to have a program, and we've also done surveys where there have been high percentages of residents responding that they would like one. Also, many neighboring municipalities have implemented successful programs. So Northumberland County has had a program in place for a number of years now. Recently, the city of Peterborough last fall implemented a very successful program, and city of Kawartha Lakes will be implementing a program this year. The province has said that they are looking at banning food waste from landfill by 2030. So that was originally in the 2018 Made in Ontario Environment Plan, and they've recommitted to this within the last year when they revisited that plan, that this is something that they have talked about. So if we implement a program now, as it was mentioned earlier, we'll be ahead of the curve and we can plan for that change if it does occur. It will also significantly reduce the county's greenhouse gas emissions. When the organics goes to the landfill, it produces methane, which is a greenhouse gas that's much more harmful than carbon dioxide. So by reducing that methane, it will help with our greenhouse gas emissions. And there are potential opportunities for efficiencies with other material collection. So like what we've been talking about, having one vehicle collecting garbage and organics at the same time, if possible, that will help efficiencies. Next slide, please. So we originally looked at 3 options when we presented this to County Council. Option 1 is a curbside organics program that would include curbside collection at all residents that currently receive garbage and blue box pickup. Option 2 is looking at a countertop composting option. Option 3 was a combination of curbside and a countertop composting option. And then since then, based on feedback that we've received at County Council, I've also added an option 4, which is curbside collection in built up or urban areas. So I'll talk about each one and the pros and cons of each. So option 1 is a curbside organics program for residential and commercial properties that currently receive garbage and blue box pickup in the county. It would be a weekly curbside collection. The county would purchase and deliver green bins and the smaller kitchen catchers for those properties. And the organics would be processed at the new city organics facility, which is at the same property as the Benser Road landfill. We could co-collect potentially with other materials if the upload goes forward, resulting in lower impact on roads. Next slide. The pros of this option, it's more familiar to residents likely than a countertop composting option, less work, less of a learning curve. More items could go in the program, so things like pet waste, fats and greases that can't go in a composter. It would be easier to measure diversion because we would be able to weigh the material as it's going to the facility. It would help encourage our partnership with the city because we'd be using their processing facility, and we could co-collect with other materials. The cons of this option, it is more expensive than a countertop composting option. There's the potential for more greenhouse gas emissions because we would have collection vehicles out on the road. Not every resident can participate. So there are townships in the county that don't have garbage and recycling pickup. And so those households wouldn't be included in this option. And there could be some wildlife concerns from bins out at the curb. Next slide, please. Option 2 that we looked at was a countertop composting option for all households in the county. This wasn't a well received option, I would say, at County Council, but we included everything in this presentation that we originally presented. So this option, we would provide countertop composters to all households in the county free of charge. We would put out an RFP to include delivery, customer service, extended warranty, and maintenance on those items. And there would have to be an extensive ongoing promotion education campaign to teach residents how to use them, do workshops and things like that. And we would suggest it be phased in over a 3-year period. Next slide, please. Pros of this option: it is less expensive than a curbside collection option. There would be lower greenhouse gas emissions and less impact on roads because we wouldn't need collection vehicles. Residents could benefit from the byproduct, so it creates a product after you run the composter that can be used as a fertilizer or other things. The county would be a leader first in Ontario to have a program at this scale. There would potentially be less wildlife concerns because the units would be stored inside. All households could participate, whether they had curbside garbage collection or not. And it wouldn't be contingent on the results of this garbage upload study because it would be just a completely separate program. We've also seen very positive results from pilot programs with these, particularly the food cyclers that many of the townships have run right now. Cons: less items can go in them, as mentioned before. There would be more education that would be needed. It could be considered more work for residents. It would be harder to measure diversion, and we would need to replace the units over time. Next slide, please. Option 3 was a hybrid option of the first two. So we would have the curbside collection program for the households that have garbage and blue box pickup. And then for the households that don't, we would provide the countertop composters. Next slide, please. Pros of this option: all households could participate. Cons: it is the most expensive option. Different programs available to different households could cause confusion, and households may want to participate in a different program than what's available to them. Next slide, please. So this option was added after we presented to County Council, option 4, which would be an urban area collection only. Staff did look at this option, but we didn't recommend it, and I'll talk a little bit about why. So this option would be curbside collection of organics in urban areas. So just to use as an example for this presentation, I've put together an example with the same areas that the county currently collects leaf and yard waste from. We collect them from the built up, more populated areas in the county, and that's 7,250 households. So in Douro-Dummer, as an example, this would include the Donwood area. That's the area that currently receives leaf and yard waste pickup. If we did move forward with this option, we would include whatever areas you wanted to. This is just as an example. If we moved forward with a program like this in all townships in these same areas, diversion could be up to 1,200 tons per year if we had full participation. But I don't anticipate with a program like this that we would have high participation, and I'll talk again about why. Next slide, please. So this is just showing the area in Donwood that receives leaf and yard pickup that would be included in the program. And next slide. So the pros of this urban area only option is that it's the least expensive option. The cons are that you would have lower diversion and minimal landfill site life extension. So much lower diversion, about a quarter possibly of the diversion than if you had a program throughout the entire county, and you're not extending the landfill site very much. We also anticipate there would be a low participation rate in a program like this, and the reason for that being is if you only have a program in one area, but the next area doesn't have it, it's very hard to provide incentives for residents to want to participate. So you can't do things like move garbage to every other week or lower the bag limit or things like that to try and entice people. You can't really ban organics from the garbage because not everyone would necessarily have that. So it's very hard to encourage participation. You're going to get participation by those residents who are really interested and keen on participating, but it's hard to get the participation from those residents who may be hesitant. And so as an example of this, we have a curbside collection pilot program right now in Selwyn in the Bridge North area. It's been in place since 2006. We've done door-to-door education campaigns trying to increase participation, and we only have an 11% participation rate in that program in that area, because there's no incentive for them to participate other than those that are very interested. The other challenge you run into with this type of program is customer service challenges or frustration. So there will be people who want to be part of the program that are frustrated that they aren't. And there may be people frustrated, especially if you have to tax all properties for this service, but not everyone's receiving it. If you only tax the households that receive the service, it would be extremely expensive because it's a small number of households that would receive that service. And then the other con is that there aren't any efficiencies or economies of scale because these would be pocketed areas throughout the county. We couldn't really co-collect with garbage because it just wouldn't work for routing purposes. Next slide, please. And so some considerations for all of the options. Participation would benefit if garbage collection was reduced to every other week. If we get to that point, whether it's whatever happens with the garbage upload and this program, a strong promotion education program would be required for all options. A spring or summer startup time would be ideal in order to capture all the seasonal residents. And we would continue to offer mall-up drop-off at the transfer stations that we currently provide that option. Next slide, please. Here I have the cost estimates for each option. These are a worst case scenario. They're high estimates. They include everything: transportation, processing, purchasing of bins, promotion, education, things like that. These will be revisited after we do all of these presentations and bring the final results back to County Council, because there have been, with the garbage upload, there have been townships that have opted out of this approach as well. So these costs will reduce and we can revisit those. But these are the initial estimates if every township was included in each program. Next slide, please. So we presented these options to the county's Waste Management Committee. They recommended County Council consider option 1, which was the curbside organics collection for everyone that receives garbage and blue box pickup. And then we presented to County Council, and they are looking for township feedback before making any decision. Next slide, please. And so finally, we have another resolution from County Council. So they have asked that we present to the local municipalities and then again choose one of the options. So the first is that the township supports the county continuing to investigate a countywide organics program and provides direction as to what methods of organics collection you would like considered. So whether it's curbside for all, curbside for urban only, or other considerations. Or 2, that the township does not wish to proceed with a countywide organics program. And we will report back to County Council. Again, the same townships that opted out of the garbage upload have opted out of the potential organics program. So that would be Trent Lakes, North Kawartha, and Cavan Monaghan, with Otonabee, South Monaghan, and Asphodel Norwoods interested in moving forward and continuing to look at options. They both liked the curbside option. And that concludes my presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that, Ms. Snoddy. Keeping an eye on the time, just a quick question before council jumps in with questions. What is your timeline for councils to get back to you with a decision?
Through you. So our last presentation is on May 7th. And so we will start to work on a report back to County Council after that. So anytime before then, I would say early May would be ideal to receive feedback back from each township.
Okay, thank you for that. So to confirm, I know we have another council meeting on May 7th. So it might be an option for council to even ask to defer this and ask staff to report back if there are further questions just being obviously cognizant of the time. Councillor Revort?
Yes, thank you, through you, Mayor Watson. Just one question in terms of diversion rates. I know there's a lot of other municipalities and cities that are doing organic programs, and just wondering what types of diversion rates those other areas are seeing, and kind of using that as an estimate of what we could expect.
Through the mayor, I believe the highest diversion rates previously reported in, say, Simcoe County, which has a really high diversion rate, I think is sitting around 65. I think I've seen some at 70%. The city of Peterborough is reporting they're sitting at, I believe, almost 80% now that they have included their new programs. So somewhere in that range. It's hard to predict exactly, but I'm estimating that if we can have some sort of organics option for the entire county, we'd be sitting up towards that, like 65% range.
Thank you.
Councillor Revort? Sorry, was that your last question? Okay, thank you.
That was my last question.
Great. Councillor Watt?
Yes, thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Just out of curiosity, and you've said you've had a couple of townships opt out of this already. And going back to what I said earlier about by 2030, no organics going to the dump for whatever you want to call it, the waste facility. How is that going to work? Like, let's just hypothetically say Douro-Dummer isn't going to go with this. What would happen to our organics come that particular time? I mean, it's kind of one of those things that we need to come up with an option here. So I don't see an option other than we have to opt in on this, because where else is our organics going to go when it comes to that time?
Through the mayor, I think those townships were, they didn't tell me what their plans were. I'm guessing they're focusing on more of a township-based solution. Cavan Monaghan does have a curbside collection pilot in Millbrook, so there are different options. Many townships are doing the countertop composting option, so there are other options. The county-wide option is, focusing on efficiencies and economies of scale and things like that to have a more widespread option available.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Roy, I'll just remind you that in Douro-Dummer, we don't allow organics in the garbage currently. It doesn't go to landfill, right?
Is it on?
No.
I don't do the garbage. I got my compost shop there, but I'm thinking like meat, bones and that kind of stuff that's left over. Like, that's kind of the things that I look more as organic than like all my vegetable, that kind of stuff goes into my compost or in my backyard.
Right.
But it's the meat and veggie, or the meat and
Those items.
those kind of items that I'm more thinking of is when it comes to organic.
Understood. Councillor Johnston?
Yeah, to the chair, the question asked earlier about the containers. It says here the county will provide the containers, and someone's gonna pay for them. So all municipalities pay the county? Like, the bottom line is municipalities pay the county for all the projects they take on. So, the county is providing these, which means that all the municipalities will have to end up paying for these too.
Through the mayor, so the county would purchase and manage the delivery and distribution of those bins. They would be paid for through the tax levy.
Okay, council, just seeing the time that we have our regular meeting that's to be starting right now, what do you want to do with the options that are available? Councillor Watt?
Like was said, we have an option back in. Are we gonna have time to have it on the 7th? Is that gonna give us enough time with our council meeting to send in a resolution that night? Or do we prefer to have one right now, if council's ready, for the two different things, and give it to them now? Because I don't know, we need a discussion any more than what we just had now. I mean, I've got my mind made up that I would certainly entertain a motion right now, but it's up to the council whether we're ready to. Think so?
Yeah.
All right, and I'm gonna make a motion that we go with option 1 in both cases, that we continue to, the township supports the county continue to investigate countywide and with the other one, with the options that they have, so we're still in the loop and they'll come back to us with some more information, some actual costs down the road.
Okay.
I'll
Councilor
second the
Johnson,
motion.
second that motion. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? That motion carries. Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Notting, for the presentations and detailed information. Really appreciate seeing you here today.
Motion to receive the both presentations with thanks.
Wonderful, seconded by Deputy Mayor Nelson. All in favor? That motion also carries. And lastly, just a motion for adjournment. Councilor Johnston, seconded by Councilor Watt. All in favor? That carries. Okay, great. Thank you. We do have a council meeting, our regular council meeting starting 2 minutes ago. So we're just going to take a quick break to reset and get the Zoom, and we will resume back in the chamber, say at 10 after. Great. Thank you very much.